New Orleans Saints GM Mickey Loomis on WWL. Saints Broncos not a Sean Payton revenge game, and look beyond the results. Ladies and gentlemen, today, waking up before crack of dawn to get y'all this video, and we have an exciting one on the books. So Mickey Loomis did what GMs do all the time when their team is in desperation. Desperate times calls for desperate measures, and those desperate measures are interviews. Jerry Jones just did one. Mickey Loomis has done this before. On one hand, I do like that GMs do this. I like that whenever the fan base or the team seems to be plummeting and there's a lot of questions and negativity, the GM kind of gets out there and says, hey, okay, let's talk about it. Let me just kind of state of the union this thing and let y'all know that I'm here. Something's being done. Now, it is important to remember that Mickey Loomis, Jerry Jones, whatever GM is doing these interviews, they're not going to come out there and say, you know what, guys, I've watched the tape. I agree. We're going to fire Dennis Allen. We're just kind of waiting for this whole thing to be over with. He's not going to come out there and say, all right, guys, look, if we lose this game Thursday, we're just going to go in a full rebuild and, we're going to start cutting contracts and trading players. He's not going to say that, right? So I know we want to hear that. I want to hear that, hey, if Dennis Allen doesn't win Thursday, he's getting fired Friday morning. But you got to remember, the Arizona Cardinals gave Cliff Kingsbury a 10-year, $100 million contract, fired him 6 months later. Lane Kiffin was given the vote of approval and left stinking at an airport. All right, so this stuff can turn very quickly. How many times have we heard Bill Belichick went in front of the world and said, I am not taking the New England Patriots job, took the New England Patriots job. Nick Saban looked in that camera and said, I am not going to Alabama. And 7 days later, he was on a lake in Tuscaloosa. So it's not always about what they are saying. But enough of that. Let's go ahead and talk or react to Mickey talking to WWL.
There's no easy way around a 4-game losing streak, and you can go to the Atlanta and the Philly and Kansas City. After that second quarter, things on top 27-24 felt like things were turning, but just could not get it together in the second half.
Yeah, look, I was really proud of our team, the way we came back after being 17-0 down. We bounced back, made some big plays on defense, had a special teams play. The offense converted, and there were some good things that happened in that first half. Look, the second half, it didn't go our way, and it started off with our first possession. We're moving the ball, and
yeah, that was kind of it. We were talking about it in the stands, but when we didn't get any points to end the first half and then didn't get any points to start the second half, that's pretty much all she wrote. In the NFL, you cannot fail at all those situational spots. Same in Kansas City, right? We failed on the opening drive through the interception, and we failed on getting points before halftime. Those situational spots are must-win situations in the NFL. Those extra possessions, the back-to-backs, and what I'm talking about there is that we could have went back-to-back. We could have got we had a possession to end the first half and then a possession to start the second half. So if you get points on both of those, you're getting yourself an extra possession, a free possession. To whiff on both of those, not take advantage of the extra possession, that doesn't work in the NFL. And you'll see really, really good teams like Kansas City. They always get something out of those extra possessions. They always come away with a field goal or something in those kind of pivotal moments.
And had a couple things happen that were of our own doing. And, the game kind of turned right there. I felt like we needed to get an early score and get some momentum and some positive things happening. And it didn't happen. They made some adjustments. We had difficulty running the ball, so I think they recognized that. Did a lot more blitzing, kept Spencer inside the pocket, and they just played better than we did in the second half.
Now, Mickey, how do you view this? All your years of experience and all the football that you've witnessed. Then when you're looking at how do you evaluate? Because no one practices tackling anymore. You might tackle a dummy. But no, you can pay the players a bunch of money, can't get anybody hurt. They still get hurt even though we don't tackle. And the tackling was atrocious, like Dennis Allen said. Maybe we've got to do more tackling drills. But is it about effort, or how do you view that? Because I'm looking at it's a trend that's not good. It's the third straight game in which the Saints have double-digit missed tackles. Is it the individual players? You look at even before the Bucs game against Kansas City, we had 12 missed tackles, and then all of a sudden against Atlanta we had 10, and then we all know what occurred yesterday. So how do you view, as an observer, and you evaluating the talent, how do you view like tackling, and how do you finish the deal on the defensive side? Because they got to be totally unacceptable when you give up 277 yards rushing. Come on.
I would say the tackling thing has obviously been the conversation this week. What I would say to the tackling thing, it should be inferred that every defensive player in the NFL at a professional level understands either how to tackle or the importance of tackling. On top of that, most of these players have done this at a high level for a long period of time. No one should be questioning if Demario Davis knows how to tackle. No one should be questioning, does Cam Jordan know how to tackle? Does Tyrann Mathieu know how to tackle? Does Marshawn Lattimore? Does Paulson Adebo? Does Alontae Taylor? Does Carl Granderson? Like, all those guys have pretty much checked the tackle box there on their card, right? They didn't just forget how to tackle. They didn't just not remember, wait a minute, I am supposed to tackle. That's right. I've been in the league for 9 years. I'm an all-pro. But in this game, I have forgotten. So the next question is effort, right? The next question is the effort there? Now, then the next question, if the effort is there, is, are these guys getting older? Like, are they getting older and we're watching a slip? Like, that doesn't really work with, like, Chase Young and Granderson and players like that. But a split-second difference for a Tyrann Mathieu or a Demario Davis or a Cam Jordan, that's the world in the NFL. So I would ask about the effort. Like, is the effort there? And then I would ask about the physical side of it. If those two are both there, then I guess then you'd have to look at Allen in the position that he's putting these players in to make said tackle. But, I mean, it's weird that we're talking about tackling. That's a really weird, like, microcosm of the game that we're questioning on. I definitely, I agree. If we're missing 10-plus tackles a game, it's something. It's not nothing. But it's almost like a wide receiver getting the drops or something, where if a wide receiver in the NFL, like, not just a wide receiver, but an established wide receiver, if all of a sudden they start dropping passes, like, how do you factor that in? Because they know how to do it. They have shown they can do it, but now they're not doing it. So it is kind of a mystery when skills like that drop off rapidly.
Yeah.
Ohio State versus Kent State. I mean, it's the NFL versus NFL. So how do you view, like, all the years you watch, like, tackling, and all of a sudden it's a trend where 3 straight games we've done a horrendous job at tackling?
Yeah.
I think there's 2 answers to that. The first one's a little more global, right? It's more about the league, and I think these are the fundamental things like this are part of the consequence of a smaller, a shorter off season, not practicing as many times. Look, Bobby, when you were playing, you had in training camp, you probably had 60 to 65 padded practices in training camp, right? And now we have 17. And in general, I would say league-wide, tackling is it's not a lost art because there are guys that are good tacklers, but it's a lot more rare, and missed tackles are a lot more common. So I think from a global standpoint, that's one of the real difficulties is how do you practice tackling when you don't have as many live practices and padded practices that are necessary.
I find that hard to believe. I find it really hard to believe that because of a lack of off-season practices, we are suffering this, like, spike in missed tackles. Unless the number across the entire NFL is up right now, and then unless you can prove that. But you could also say, well, the offensive skill players are better than ever. You could say they're more elusive than ever. It's much more difficult to It would make much more sense to me, and I'm just kind of hypothesizing here early on a Wednesday. It would make much more sense to me that if an old scheme that Allen's running got his players in one-on-one kind of situations, like, okay, blank defensive player is responsible for this tackle right here. And 5, 6, 7 years ago, when the offensive players weren't as good and weren't as elusive, it was a little easier for that one player to make that tackle. Now, it's very, very difficult for one player to, at a high level, make that tackle because of how good and elusive and fast and whatever the offensive players are. I could see that being a reason. I could see that making some sense of like, well, the responsibility now is harder for that responsibility to be a thing because of how difficult the job is. Like, okay, yeah, all right. I just don't know if I buy that because of a lack of offseason practices that all of a sudden no one can tackle unless the entire league is going through this. But if the entire league is going through this, then it's not a conversation because it's not like impacting the Saints worse than anyone else. So we're in this kind of paradoxical situation here.
The second thing is that there are teams that do a good job of tackling, and we have to be more focused on that. I think that we've been a good tackling team in the past, and so this has kind of cropped up this season and part of last season for us, and we've got to come up with answers for it. And you're right, it gets back to, hey, we have to have an emphasis on it, and we have to more of an emphasis on it because we have an emphasis on it, but we have to have more of an emphasis on it. It has to be at the forefront of players' minds and coaches' minds. And so how do you do that? You spend more time in practice. You do drill work. More difficult during the regular season because, a lot of the time is spent, scheming and preparing for your opponent. But we do have to get back to some fundamental things because if we don't, we're just beating ourselves.
Mickey, how do you, I don't know, because fans ask me about how can we go kind of like from the penthouse to the outhouse. Everyone's ecstatic. We're getting off to a 2-0 start. We crushed Dallas. We crushed Carolina, and we crushed Dallas. And then, Dallas just got crushed by the Lions. Then all of a sudden, you go on a 4-game losing streak, and now we've lost 4 straight games the last time. That was Sean Payton's final season in 2021. So how important is this Thursday night game? The question I have for you, because I know Sean Payton wants to beat the Saints. And I know as an organization we want to beat Sean Payton. So I don't know, you call it a grudge game, whatever, and you friends with Sean, everybody's friends. But, it's like when you compete with your brother, you want to kick your brother's ass. I mean, it's just the way it is. So come Thursday night, I think it counts more than just are we going to beat the Broncos or not. That this is something that you talk about years to come, because how many times you get to face off with people that you know and your friends.
Well,
I think this is one of those things where you got to kind of take a step back, too, as a fan. I think Peyton wants to beat the Saints really bad, knowing Sean Payton. He is a prickly pear. This is the kind of thing that he focuses on. But if you go to a player level, like, do you think that Connor McGovern cares about Sean Payton? No. Do you think any of these guys, like those guys who weren't there, Spencer Rattler has zero reference for Sean Payton, like zero reference at all. Doesn't know him, didn't play for him, no interaction with him. Like Spencer Rattler is focused on being the quarterback of the Saints. Spencer Rattler is focused on how can I be better than last game, right? Some players, sure. Cam Jordan, Alvin Kamara, like those players, absolutely this game might mean, I'm not going to say more, because you would hope every game is important, right? You would hope every game is a 10 for a team like the Saints, especially on a skid. You would hope that after an embarrassment against Kansas City, Tampa Bay at home was a 10 as far as like effort and all that. So I think Sean probably wants to win more than anyone else on the field, if I had to guess.
First of all, Bobby, there was a lot of questions in that speech you just gave. So I'll try to get them one at a time. The first is, I think you asked me how to explain, 4 straight losses. And look, I think this because, right, game 1, game 2, man, we're rolling on all cylinders. I felt like we played pretty well in games 3 and 4, although we had a couple things that, the game against Philadelphia, look, we went toe-to-toe with them and had a really good chance to win that game at the end. And we just, we got in our own way. We had two guys running into each other, and they got a big play, and our opportunity to win that game went down the tubes. And against Atlanta, again, we came back from a couple of self-inflicted mistakes early in the game, came back, took the lead at the end, had a chance to close out the game, and we didn't do that. That happens in the National Football League. The last two games are different. And I think, listen, I don't like – everybody has injuries, right? We all do. And yet some injuries are more important than others. And when you have 3/5 of your offensive line unavailable to play, when you lose, some of the players we've lost on defense in terms of just the intelligence of our defense, and intelligence isn't the right word, but some of the leaders of our defense, not being at full strength or not playing, that catches up to you, and it really catches up to you when you're playing really good teams. And we played.
I don't disagree with that. Like, I do think there is something to be said about missing your best players at key positions against really good teams like the Kansas City Chiefs. Like DeMario Davis, like players like that, you lose them in big spots. Taysom Hill, players like that, you lose them in big spots. Like, yeah, that absolutely makes a difference, 100%, especially when you're an underdog team, especially when you're already thin at other spots. So there is something to be said about that. And that's kind of, that I always talk about context, and I always talk about like the context of games and the context of results. It really isn't that we're losing the games. Like the 4-game losing streak is kind of whatever. To me, we should have beat Atlanta. Like if you look at the box score, if you look at everything, we outplayed Atlanta. We should have beat Atlanta. We shouldn't have beat Philly. We could have beat Philly, but we shouldn't have beat them. Shouldn't have beat Kansas City. Certainly shouldn't have beat Tampa. But when you look at the games and you look at Tampa and you look at KC, it's like we got dominated in those games. So what is happening to where we're unprepared, we're unwilling, we're however you want to phrase it, to where we are getting rolled in these games? Like what is the problem? Why is that happening? Not so much like why are we in a 4-game losing streak, but why are we getting smoked by the Bucs at home? What's going on?
Played two really good teams in the last 2 weeks. That caught up to us this last weekend. And look, I don't have any answers for 51 points being allowed, but those were good teams. But that's where we're at. And we've got an opponent coming in on Thursday night on a short week. It's not a revenge game. Sometimes you play against a team you were with and you have bitter or angry feelings about that team. You want to beat them because of that. That's not this game with Sean. Sean loved his time here with the Saints. He has love for the city and the organization. But you're right. It's like playing against your brother. You want to beat him, and we feel the same way. And so it'll be a dogfight. He'll pull out all the stops, and we have to be prepared for that.
Your overall assessment of Spencer Rattler, he was 22 of 40, 243, sacked 5 times, had the touchdown to his rookie, Bub Means, had the 2 interceptions. And after the fumble to Olave, I'm sure because the defense had given up the early touchdown, I'm sure he's going, what in the world? It's 14-0. He'd barely been on the field. Your overall assessment, because I would assume in a short week, not a whole lot is going to change from a Derek Carr situation. So your thoughts on Spencer?
I've said this before, but I thought Spencer was fine. I thought Spencer was good. I don't think Spencer. I'd give him a C. Like I'd give him a C minus somewhere in there. Like okay, there's stuff there. He's a rookie quarterback. On to the next one. Like there's not a whole lot to assess in that game. Really weird game flow. Walking to the Dome, I was asked would you rather kick or receive to start the game. And I said, I would rather receive because I want to get Spencer in there on a neutral game state. I want to get him in there 0-0, get into the game, get into the flow. You don't want a player playing from behind. You don't want to screw up that game script. LOL, the most screwed up possible game script, right? All of a sudden he is down immediately. And then it's like, okay, now the offense has to change. Now the rhythm has to change. Everything has to change. And that is not, that's not what you want for a rookie quarterback. I thought he handled everything pretty well. I thought some things he did good. I thought some things he did bad. I would say for the situation he was in, I would say pretty decent.
Yeah, I thought it was a good first outing for him.
Yeah.
And more so from the standpoint of, I thought he was poised. He kept his composure. Things weren't going our way early, and it's easy to, try to do too much. And yet I felt like he stayed within the offense, made some plays, both with his legs and his arm. And I thought it was really encouraging overall.
Yeah.
I thought that, they made some, I mentioned this, they made some adjustments at halftime and did a lot of bringing pressure. And so that made it more difficult in the second half, particularly when you're behind, when you get behind like that and you have to throw it every down. But I thought it was a good outing. I thought our offensive coaches did a really good job of designing the game plan that took advantage of his skill set, and we're looking for more development, more growth in this next game.
Mickey, when I look at Coach Allen, and I've always taken up for Coach Allen as far as, know both sides of the ball. Like Sean Payne's an offensive coach. The coach I had, Jim Morrow's a defensive coach. Coach Allen's a defensive coach. But what sucks are kind of, that ain't good, is when you're in charge of the defense and all of a sudden they're struggling. And then Coach Allen, who calls the Saints defensive plays, that's his baby. And he said, and he held himself accountable, have to do a better job with our guys and have to make sure we understand what we're doing. And he went on and on. But that's why the fans get disgruntled. That was supposed to be our strength of our team, and as of late, our defense sucks. Now, we're outstanding red zone defense, which is number one in the league. We're only giving up 25% as far as touchdown production. But then the Bucks were like 4 or 5, 80%. That's why a lot of fans say, well, at least we could count on our defense keeping us in games. But it seems like that has not been the case as of late. If that's supposed to be Coach Allen's wheelhouse, boy, but where are we trending right now if our defense is going to struggle?
Yeah, I mean, this is 100% a problem. Like, you cannot be a coach who already is on the hot seat, who already has a bad track record of being a head coach, one of the most losing head coaches in history. You cannot be bad at the one thing that you're supposed to be good at. I say it all the time. The NFL is now a coordinator league. There's really not a head coach per se. It's like there's no head coach that's just calling everything. Like they're a specialist in one thing, and then they have another coordinator, and it's like a mismatch of things. When Allen, his saving grace has been that he has been a really good defensive play caller. Well, if you are an average defensive play caller in the situation that he's in, you can go find a better defensive play caller to beat the head coach, right? When you are a last in the NFL defense and you're the defensive coordinator for all intents and purposes and the head coach, get him out of there. I agree. Now, I will say, it's a couple games here. Let's say four games where we've had really bad defensive performances. Allen needs to fix that more than he needs to fix, like, winning. If we lose to the Broncos, okay. If we lose to the Broncos 6-0, and it's, they're averaging 3.7 yards a carry, okay. But if the Broncos go out there and light us up, and they're averaging 7 yards a rush and 6.5 yards a play, and they score 30 points, and we lose, like, okay, this thing's broken. Like, this is broken. It is. Your job is to fix the defense. Your job is to be the DC. That ain't working. So this is worst case scenario for a guy like Dennis Allen. 100%.
I mean, you're right in terms of, look, our defense has struggled the last couple of weeks in particular, and that's not up to our standard. Look, I think it's easy to look at the last game or the last two games and say this is what we are, but I think you have to look at a longer period, for that. And we've been able to play really good defense for a long period of time, but we haven't.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that because I understand the idea of we've been a really good defense for, let's just say, 5 straight years. We're having a bad stretch here of 4 games. Like, you don't throw everything out because of those 4 games, but you couple that with we're also not tackling. Oh, well, we're also not stopping the run. Oh, well, we're also not, doing this. Oh, we're also not doing this. It's like, that's a whole lot of stuff that's going wrong like at some point you do have to consider it. At some point you do have to consider, like, yeah, those 5 years were cool. Something has changed. Something has gone awry here. And I don't think it's tackling drills. So they have to get it fixed quick, real quick. On one hand, I do understand what Mickey's saying. On the other hand, it's like, well, nothing is showing me that this defense can get anywhere near the defense that it was a couple of years ago. So it's hard to hold that like in the same, very highly.
Played really good defense the last 2 weeks, for sure. And so why is that? Well, you can't win a game. The first thing about winning a game is you've got to avoid beating yourself, right? And how do we beat ourselves? Well, we don't tackle well. We get penalties. We do some things that are, I think, are uncharacteristic of the teams that we've had in the past. So we've got to solve that first. We've got to solve the.
But that is kind of characteristic of Dennis Allen teams. Like, we all have seen the stats where Dennis Allen has the lowest wins of the win expectancy to actual realized wins. Dennis Allen's like worst in the NFL of that percentage. Like if you're expected to win a game, you should win a game. Dennis Allen teams tend to not win those games. Why? Because of things like untimely penalties, because of things like untimely explosive plays given up, like situational spots, and that is kind of characteristics of a bad head coach. So what Mickey is describing is kind of the problem, and that is Dennis Allen.
Self-inflicted wounds. Part of that is playing complementary football too, and not turning the ball over on your side of the field. Controlling offensively, controlling the clock a little bit so that we keep our defense off the field, particularly when you get shorthanded. So those are the things that we have to solve, and we've got a short period of time to solve them.
Todd Bowles is a good example. Todd Bowles sucks as a head coach. He has nothing to do with the offense. But Todd Bowles can hang his hat on, like, yeah, we have an absolutely insane defensive front, and our defense is good. So it's like, okay, well, as long as that is true, then okay, fine. If the Buccaneers defense is 32nd in the NFL, Todd Bowles is gone. Todd Bowles is not a situational master. He is terrible at timeout, situational things in the game. But he's got a sweet defense, and that's good enough to keep him around. Dennis Allen, very similar, but right now, not only is his defense not good, it is the worst.
Now, Mickey, when I look at, everybody gets old, Father Time, you look at all that, but fans have asked me, they say, boy, Cam Jordan really looks old. Sometimes you might say it's better to get rid of a player a year too early than a year too late. But then even as of late, Demario Davis. And look, he's not the typical Demario Davis season. Now, you're dealing with injury, whatever, the older you get. And, he's always hit that century mark as far as tackles. But I don't know if I've ever witnessed a game that the top 5 tacklers in our game against Tampa Bay were all DBs. Well, hell yeah, if it's all DBs, you're going to give up 270-something yards rushing, like Adebo, Lattimore, Houghton, Abram, Alante Taylor. And then it wasn't until you get Demario Davis and Willie Gay after that. And I think it also starts right up front. We want Chase Young to get sacks and all that, but I think it leaves a lot to be desired as far as his run support. I think Brian Brzee has gotten better, but also his run support. I think teams feel like right now, and I think in Sean and Denver, they're going to come in here feeling they can run against us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Lamborghini package or this NASCAR package or whatever with the defensive front. It's basically 4 pass rushers, which is good because we have a super high pass rush or a super high rush rate. But 1, we're not getting sacks, so it's not unrealized pressure rate. And 2, there's nothing as far as like stopping the run. Then you go to the linebackers. Werner's been out, Davis has been out at times, Willie Gay's been out at times. So then you get to a depleted linebacker core who aren't making the tackles, and that's how you get to the defensive backs leading the team in tackles, because the defensive line is not existent when it comes to stopping the run. And then you got just kind of bad linebackers. And so, yeah, your defensive backs have become the first line of defense and the last line of defense for opponents rushing.
I think that, look, a lot of what you said is there's some truth to it. Teams are going to try to run on us until we prove that they can't. And,
Yeah.
That's incumbent upon the players and coaches in our organization to come up with answers for that. So never want your leading tacklers to be your DBs. I agree with that 100%. That's not a good sign. But I also think this too. We want players that are tough, right? And we want players that'll go out there even when they're not feeling great, when they're a little banged up or a lot banged up. And I think there's some guys on the field that are banged up and they're tough. They're playing through it, but maybe they're not quite as capable as they would be if they were fully healthy. So we've got to overcome that, right? That's just part of being part of the National Football League. But you said it, we've got to play better defense. We've got to find a way to stop the run, and it's incumbent upon each person to look at themselves and say, hey, I can play better.
So, Mickey, a twofer here. When was the last time you talked to Sean Payton? What was the conversation about? And then talk about Kendre Miller and his opportunity to get back on the football field for Thursday.
1, who cares? 2, who cares? The team is in a free fall. The team is in turmoil. It's a complete disaster across the board. I don't care if Mickey and Sean Payton are having lunch every single day. I don't care if they're catching breakfast Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I don't care. And I don't care about Kendre Miller's availability either, because Kendre Miller hasn't played ever. What I care about is that with the 32nd ranked defense in yards per game given up, what I care about is that we're on a 4-game losing streak. What I care about is that the roster is in complete turmoil, where 70% of the offensive starters aren't even on the field because of injury, and then 70% of defensive starters might as well be on the injured reserve because they're not playing, they're not doing anything. So we're in a crazy time as far as roster-wise. So I could care less about Mickey and Sean Payton.
Oh, gosh, when was the last time I talked to Sean? I think it was about a week ago, actually. We just talked about, how this season was going and how ours was going. We talked about some of the things that, that we've seen around the league. It wasn't, it was just kind of a check-in call. Nothing earth-shattering or anything like that. We didn't talk at all about the upcoming game. Yeah, it wasn't anything earth-shattering, that's for sure. Kendre, look, we're excited about him getting healthy and maybe having an opportunity to contribute to us in the next few weeks. So look, he's a talented player. He hasn't been able to stay on the field and get on the field because of some soft tissue things primarily, but he's ready to roll right now, and I like his progress.
Now, Mickey, if you put your head on the pillow, it's Saturday night before the Sunday game, and if you would have had a dream, and this dream is reality, that we're playing Atlanta and they're not going to score an offensive touchdown, I think you would take that, hell yeah, we're going to win the game. And then you look at what occurred yesterday. We get 3 interceptions and we run back a punt for a touchdown. You're not supposed to lose those kind of games. I mean, I was like shocked just based on, if you just told me that that's what occurred in the game, I'd be like, man, what the hell happened? How did we lose that? Now, does that come to coaching? I mean, because you have those things that you think that definitely that's a winning formula to win, but you got to close the deal. Like, okay, you look at the Chiefs. They might be winning ugly, but they close out the games. And then we've been in situations, and the Eagles and the Chiefs, the Eagles needed a touchdown. We couldn't close them out. We played good defense. And then you look at too many times, and even Atlanta, not being able to close out games. But just looking what occurred then and what we did as far as taking away the football, are you getting like a special teams touchdown? Come on, you can't afford to lose those games because that could be the difference whether you get to double-digit wins or not.
Well, yeah, but it's also like it shows you how difficult it is to even be in games when you're giving up 8 yards per play or 8 yards per rush, and you're getting outgained by 200 yards, and you're getting the time of possessions 20 minutes, less for your team. It takes a tremendous effort to even be in the game. Like Atlanta's a bad example because we should have won that game. But like the Bucks, it takes 3 interceptions in the first half to even be in the game because you're giving up 8 yards per play. And then when it's like, okay, well, we need 1 defensive stop, and then you look and you see like, well, like Philly, you're giving up. I know it's an explosive play, but you're giving up 7 yards per play, 7 yards a rush. So it is one stop, but like you haven't done anything all game to show that you can have a stop. If all they need is to march down the field, it's pretty easy to march down the field when you're averaging 7 to 8 yards a play. So the Saints have been fortunate in some situations, like Philly, where Philly has a lot of red zone turnovers, a lot of fourth downs that went the other way, but Philly completely dominated the game. So you have to, and then the Saints, like against the Bucs, some of those turnovers we didn't score. Like I said, we didn't score on the possession to end the first half. We didn't score on the possession to start the second half. When you factor all that stuff in, it's like, okay, well, I mean, we you don't deserve to win the game. Like you're not winning. You're not winning in those facets, and you have to win in those facets of the game. The game is just it's just like a high view of all the little things that happen during the game. And if you look across that and you look at what the Saints are doing, you can see like, all right, well, we failed in this facet of the game. 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 So you shouldn't win. Like I said, with Philly, great example. If you look at the score, it's like, we were right there. But then you look at the actual game and you're like, well, we couldn't stop the run. We couldn't stop them defensively. We couldn't do anything. We got outgained by 200 yards. We got this, we got that, we got that. It's like, well, we probably shouldn't have won anyway. So it's almost like Fugazi. It's a Fugazi. Like some of these games are not close. Like the Philly game is not close. That we got absolutely rolled. And Philly didn't have two of their best players. Like A.J. Brown wasn't there, and Devontae Smith goes out. Like Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley beat us, beat the holy hell out of us. So it's ugly across the board.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at here is that, then you want to get your team to the point where you expect to win, because when you expect to win and you have those things that can happen that don't go your way, they're just little speed bumps that you cruise right over, right? Because you have confidence and you have a lot of players that believe they're going to make a big play, when it counts. And when you hope to win, and I think most teams are in that position of where they hope to win, those speed bumps become little mountains. And so we have, our goal is obviously to get to the point where we're expecting to win. And I felt like then we were moving that direction after the first 2 or 3 weeks, right? And then, we've had some adversity. We've had, like I said, we've had a lot of injuries, a lot of guys missing that are key players, playmakers for us. And, we weren't able to close out those 2 games, Atlanta and Philadelphia. So we got to get back to that. We know we have a good team. We know we do. And we're confident in that. But we have to weather this storm and weather these weeks where we're not at full strength, and we have to find a way to be competitive, and find ways to win games. And again, that starts with not beating ourselves, right? Getting back to fundamentals. We got to coach better.
I mean, it's such a weird situation, because on one hand, like, yeah, it is a good team, sure. Like this year, they have shown to be a good team. But then 3 weeks later, you're looking at, okay, well, all of a sudden we're last in the NFL in yards per game given up. So what's going on here? Because both can't be true. You can't simultaneously have a good team and be dead last in yards per game with a defensive-oriented head coach. Like, that cannot happen. Just like you can't say, we have a pretty good, hypothetically, we have a pretty good quarterback, and then you look and the quarterback leads the league in interceptions and is last in EPA. It's like, okay, well, no, you do not. Like, they cannot both be a real thing. The problem the Saints have is that this is like the make or break year. This is the make or break season for literally everything. So all this, like, well, we just get back to fundamentals, and well, we know we have good stuff here. We just got to kind of find it. So, okay, my man, we're 2-4. Like, we are on a 4-game losing streak. We are staring down 2-5. all that can't be a thing. We don't have time to figure it out. We don't have time to go back to fundamentals. We don't have that luxury. Other teams do. Like, other teams have the luxury of, okay, well, we can kind of wait, we can kind of be patient, we can see what happens. That's not where the Saints are right now. So the Saints right now are caught in between two seasons. They're caught in between win now with this team, which seems funny on the back end of a 4-game losing streak, and they're caught in between like a full rebuild. Because, Dennis Allen, if you fire Dennis Allen, it's because the Saints were bad, and it's because it's time for a change. It doesn't really matter what you think about the players, because then you have to look at their age and the contracts. Well, it doesn't make any sense if you're firing Dennis Allen and rebuilding. It makes no sense to bring back Derek Carr. It makes no sense to restructure Alvin Kamara's contract. It makes no sense to bring back the combination of Demario Davis, Cam Jordan, Tyrann Mathieu. Like, it makes no sense to bring those players back. So then you start, Paulson Adebo's a free agent. Okay, why would you bring him back? All of a sudden now you've got a head coach you're moving on from. You've got a quarterback you're moving on from. You've got a defensive scheme you're moving on from. You have to rebuild a lot. That's where the Saints are. We are in between win now, go to the playoffs, compete for the division with this cast of characters we have right here, or the other side. That's it. And a 4-game losing streak, that pushes you real close to that rebuild. If you lose to Denver and you're 2-5, I mean, the rebuild is on. Like, at that point, it's on. And at that point, you might as well fire Allen, because you're going to anyways. Start Rattler the rest of the way, and start figuring out how you can handle things financially.
We got to play better, and I believe we will.
Well, Mickey, I'm looking. We +3 in the turnover margin, and that's why it's shocking to me. Even last season, we were +11. You look at scoring, offense, and defense. I'm like, how in the hell we didn't get to 10 wins? That's why I still emphasize, to me, and is that that you have to look at the head coach. Is that we're not closing out games. We're highly competitive, but it's a bottom line business. Did you win or did you lose the game? That's why I think fans are frustrated, because you could be so close and so far, and you might say there's not much difference between 10-7 and 7-10. But if you're 7-10, the Who Dat Nation is restless, and then they're frustrated. But if you're 10-7, then everybody's ecstatic. But the bottom line is you have to win. It's not like, we're competing hard and playing hard. That it's a bottom line business. You have to win, and it's not just we're in the hunt, we're playing hard and all that. You got to win.
So I disagree fundamentally with what Bobby's saying. But on the same token, right now you can't even say we're competing, we're playing hard, we're doing whatever. That's why I think there's time for a change. The Atlanta game, great example. Like, we lost the Atlanta game. If it's a bottom line business, you're like, okay, well, it's bad we lost the Atlanta game. Someone should get fired. If you look at, did we compete? Did we play hard? All that stuff. If you look at that and you're like, well, I mean, this was a really weird thing. Like, we outplayed Atlanta. There's something here, obviously. We did beat ourselves with the muff punt and all that. So, that's one of those things that kind of evens itself out. Philly, Kansas City, Tampa Bay, you can't say any of that. Philly, Tampa Bay, Kansas City, you can't say, well, we were competitive. Well, we played hard. You're not competitive at all. You're not playing hard. I mean, there's been a lot of questions about effort. There's been a lot of questions about, tackling, for God's sakes. All right, so you're not doing that. And, yeah, it's a razor's edge between 10-7 and 7-10. And if the context is there for you're playing pretty well, like if the numbers are there and if everything adds up, and people keep saying, which is absolutely mind-blowing, but people keep saying, where are the numbers now? Right? Because we leaned on the numbers early in the season. Where are the numbers now? And that's the craziest thing I've ever heard, because the numbers reflect exactly what we're talking about. If you just look at the numbers and you look at the context of the games, you can see a stark decline in our defensive performance. You can see a stark decline in everything, really. But so the numbers tell the story just like they told the story at the beginning of the year. And the beginning of the year to right now is two totally different teams. Totally different teams. I mean, I understand, and offensively, you do have to factor in some injuries. I mean, offensively, it would be crazy for you to say, like, oh, well, I saw this coming from a million miles away offensively. It's like, how? You saw 8, 9 injuries on offense happen. You saw Connor McGovern being the starting center. Like, I don't think anybody saw that coming. Defensively, that's the big question mark. And that's the question mark that's most important because Dennis Allen has to answer that. And him alone is responsible for that. So it's not good right now. It's just not good right now from what we're seeing. This thing has gotten ugly quick. And I mean, it is on Allen. It is on Allen to where it's like, we'll go down a little metaphor here, but it's like if you had a restaurant and the head chef of the restaurant, in this case is Dennis Allen, and if the desserts was his main thing, that's what he was known for, best pastry chef in the world, and you've got a supply chain issue. This is an out of control metaphor. You have a supply chain issue where your entree, the meat, isn't really available. So you had to shift. So all of a sudden now you're serving seafood. And people are eating at the restaurant. They're like, well, yeah, the fish isn't that bad. Seafood's not that bad. But the desserts are absolutely horrible. In that situation, you would look at it and go like, okay, well, I understand why the entree's a little off because of the supply chain issues, injuries in this metaphor. But why are the desserts off if the head chef, head coach, is in charge of that, and that's not really where the supply chain issues were? That's the conundrum we're in. Offensively, I understand. We should all be able to understand offensively why there's a problem. Why is there such a big defensive problem? What is going on? Dennis, what's happening? And one answer is that it's Dennis Allen's fault. The other answer is that it's the player's fault. It might be a combination of the two. But in both answers, the solution is really just kind of a rebuild. Because if it's the player's fault, Allen's getting fired anyways. But you also had to rebuild the roster. And if it's the coach's fault, Allen's getting fired. But because of the timeline of all the players and the contracts, you probably got to rebuild the roster anyways. So unless the Saints start winning, a.k.a. Thursday night, all roads lead to a full-scale rebuild to which we haven't seen since before Sean Payton. This is I don't think people, if you think right now is bad, we are headed straight towards a totally new chapter, an uncharted chapter for the New Orleans Saints, because your hand is forced at this point. There is no slow descent. Your hand is forced to lose a lot of the players that people are very used to seeing in black and gold, and to in some of their cases, to no fault of their own. It's just, it is what it is. Alvin Kamara is a great example. He has given everything this year for this team, and at one point was looking like the offensive player of the year. He is playing through injuries with no guaranteed money next year. He is a valiant effort. But to no fault of his own, if this does go the route of the rebuild, he probably is not a New Orleans Saint. Derek Carr, another example. Derek Carr has played pretty well this year. Derek Carr is sitting right now still in the top 10 of EPA. Been pretty decent. But because of his age, because of the contract, because of his ties to Dennis Allen, because anytime you bring in a head coach and a new staff, they're going to want their own players. They're going to want their own identity. Kubiak and Janoko were brought in after Carr, so more than likely, if they can, they'll move on from Carr too. To no fault of his own. Just a weird kind of timeline and all that with everything.
Or look, 6, 7, 8 coaches get fired every year because they don't win and people want changes. And so we already got one coach fired in New York. That didn't surprise me with the Jets, how they are. They always been dysfunctional. But every year, everybody wants to win, but everybody can't win. So 6, 7, 8 coaches get fired. And that could be the difference. Comebacks to haunt you when you don't finish games to have a chance to be in the postseason and get the double-digit wins.
Yeah, I mean, look, everything you say is accurate. Results matter. They do. But I think one of the things that I think good organizations do is that, man, you look beyond the results. What's the reason for the result?
Yeah,
and
I agree.
How do you fix the reasons that keep you from winning? And it's not always about the head coach. Sometimes it is, but it's not always about that. It's about a lot of different variables. A lot of things are involved in winning and winning a particular game or winning a lot during the course of a season. And so that's what we'll look at that when the time comes. But the time is not right now. We have a lot of games left. We have a talented team, and we'll see where it goes from here.
I don't really think that's a vote of confidence from Mickey. I think if anything, that's Mickey saying, like, we're probably not going to fire him mid-season. But, I mean, to me, it sounds like Mickey understands and agrees, like, there is a need for some real hard looking. And it doesn't take a genius to realize that if you do that hard looking, all eyes go to Dennis Allen. I mean, that's it. Like, and I do agree with Mickey, which I just talked about. Like, you do have to look beyond the results. But when you look beyond the results and the problem is seemingly the defense and seemingly aging players and, all that stuff, then there's your answer. So I don't really think, I don't really think this is a vote of confidence from Mickey. I don't. Yeah, when he says, like, well, it's not always the head coach, sometimes it is, though. That to me, that sounds like he's thinking, or, he understands that, hey, I'm not going to come right out and say it's Dennis Allen's fault, but it could be Dennis Allen's fault. And, I can't imagine this gets much better. Just the way that the Saints have been playing. I mean, it would have to be a pretty drastic turnaround. And there's a good chance, like, Denver isn't exactly the team that's like a nightmare matchup. The Chargers are a nightmare matchup. The Rams are a nightmare matchup. If a team just wants to run the football on us currently, that's a nightmare matchup. You also have Atlanta in the Dome. So there are, like, if this doesn't get drastically better, there are a lot of games, embarrassing games, that is going to push Mickey closer and closer to this, like, okay, let's just go ahead and get rid of Allen. Now, again, does that mean he'll fire him mid-season? Probably not. But, yeah, I was expecting this to be much more of Mickey kind of like, we can win, we've got the right people, we can do this, I trust Dennis Allen, but I didn't really get that from this interview. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me know in the comments below what you thought about this. Do you think Mickey was defending Dennis Allen? What's your view on this? Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.